The alarm klaxon rang out across the central atrium of the Veltraxian orbital habitat, a deep, warbling siren that made everyone pause mid-step. Humans, Glorthan, Tavanari, even the stoic, gelatinous French halted to look up at the pulsing red lights. Darian Wexley dropped the hydrospanner he'd been using to adjust a pressure manifold and looked over at the Paintian engineer beside him. "Is that what I think it is?" Darian asked, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his grease-streaked hand. The Paintian, tall, narrow-waisted, with skin the color of oxidized copper, tilted his cranial crest. "Containment breach in the medical wing. Biohazard. Level 7. Darian's stomach nodded. "That's the highest level." "Yes." He didn't waste another second. He pulled off his gloves, tossed them into the disposal chute, and sprinted toward the medbay wing. The door hissed open for him, but 2 Tavanari guards blocked his path inside. Each of the reptilian aliens held a stun staff angled across their chest. "No entry," the one on the left said. "Quarantine is in effect. All humans must remain outside the cordon. I'm with the Earth Consortium Science Corps. I'm immunology trained. Let me in. Orders are absolute." Behind the glass, chaos unfolded. Medical staff in full biosuits rushed between containment pots. A translucent French was convulsing inside a sealed chamber, its normally calm bioluminescence flashing erratically. Darian pounded the glass. "Someone tell me what pathogen we're dealing with." A voice crackled in his earpiece. "Darian." "It's Dr. Niven," came the voice of a Veltraxian physician, nasal and trembling. "We found an anomaly during the preservation scan of old Earth samples your team donated last month." "You're using Earth samples without clearance?" "We were cross-referencing for protein compatibility in a multi-species vaccine sequence. There was no indication what pathogen." There was a pause. "It's labeled as varicella zoster. We assumed it was inert. Extinct." Darian's blood ran cold. "Chickenpox? You're locking down the entire habitat over chickenpox." The silence that followed was thick. "We have never encountered anything like this before," Niven said. "It's replicating impossibly fast in non-Earth hosts. Most of the infected are asymptomatic carriers, but the French and Tavanari are reacting violently. Their immune systems can't interpret the virus." Darian turned to the Tavanari guards. "You need to let me in. Now." They looked at each other, then reluctantly stepped aside. Inside, the air was thick with disinfectant mist. Every surface gleamed with sterilization residue. A Glorthan medic handed Darian a respirator. "You're not suited," she said, eyes squinting beneath her visor. "I've had chickenpox." "I'm immune. You are not Glorthan." "We are." "Not." She led him to the main lab, where a dozen beings clustered around a central console. Screens showed live feeds of patient vitals, viral loads, and simulation models. "Why didn't you run a historical pathogen check before unsealing the sample?" Darian demanded. "We presumed extinction," Dr. Niven said, his eye stalks drooping. "It was archived in an eradicated folder. We didn't anticipate cross-species virulence." Darian stared at the screen. The virus had mutated slightly, adapting to non-human biologies. On Earth, it had been a childhood nuisance. Here, it was triggering systemic failures. "How many infected?" 42 confirmed. 1 critical." Darian nodded slowly. "All right. First thing, we need to isolate the strains. There's a vaccine. A simple one. Every Earth nation mandates it for children." The room fell silent. "A vaccine?" Niven said. "You mean you have a countermeasure?" "Yes. It's an attenuated virus. Live, but weakened. Triggers immunity without causing illness." The Glorthan medic narrowed her eyes. "You willingly inject yourselves with a live virus?" "It's been standard for over a century." A French technician shimmered with anxiety. "You're saying you've tamed this thing?" "Tamed is a strong word," Darian said. "But yes, we control it." Darian took the data pad and began calculating dosage adjustments. The vaccine was formulated for humans. These species had different immune tolerances, different protein receptors. He'd need to recompute every element. A Veltraxian assistant walked in, clutching a sample tube. One of the infected tried to leave quarantine. The guard stopped him. He collapsed. "We need a field solution." Darian didn't hesitate. "Give me access to your synthesis lab. I'll need Earth's vaccine genome from the archive and a protein compatibility overlay for all affected species." 2 hours later, he was still working. Sweat soaked through his undershirt. His hands trembled from fatigue. Injecting humans with the varicella vaccine was routine. Engineering a safe version for an alien species was anything but. Darian, the Glorthan medic said, "You've been standing for too long. You need rest." "No time. You're shaking." "I'm fine." He wasn't. His vision was starting to double, but he couldn't stop. Not while the French patient's vitals continued to plummet. "Prepare the first trial dose," he said. The Glorthan medic hesitated. "You want to use it already?" "On me. I'll test absorption rates." "But you're immune." "I have baseline immunity. If something's wrong with the formulation, I'll know." "You're risking anaphylaxis." "I've got an AP pen in my belt." He injected himself without flinching. Monitors beeped. Heart rate elevated slightly. Blood pressure held. No reaction. "All right," he said quietly. "Prepare the first alien dose." The French's condition had deteriorated further. Its translucent body had gone almost opaque, a sign of cellular collapse. Darian moved to the chamber, holding the injector. The French's attendant waved her long limbs. "You're certain this won't kill him?" "No, but doing nothing definitely will." He administered the dose. Then he waited. For the next 2 hours, the entire lab was silent. Finally, the French's bioluminescence steadied. The vital signs plateaued. "It's working," someone whispered. Darian slumped onto a stool, exhausted. That was the prototype. We still need species-specific versions. A Veltraxian aide burst into the lab. 3 more cases. 2 Tavanari, 1 Glorthan. We're running out of time. Darian stood again, knees nearly buckling. "Then we scale up. I'll need synthesis rights, a full genomics mapping of all species on the station, and access to the emergency fabrication base." Dr. Niven nodded. "Granted. You'll need volunteers," the Glorthan medic said. "I know." Darian left the lab and walked to the communal quarter, where a crowd of tense aliens had gathered behind a security barrier. They stared at him with wide eyes, some frightened, others angry. He stepped up onto a bench and raised his voice. "My name is Darian Wexley. I'm from Earth. What you're experiencing is a virus we thought extinct. It's called chickenpox. On my planet, it's harmless. To you, it's not. But we have a vaccine. I'm modifying it now. I need healthy volunteers for trial doses. I won't lie, there's risk. But without treatment, more of you will become critical." A Tavanari male stepped forward. "You would test it?" "On us. I already tested it on myself. It's the only path we've got." The alien looked back at the crowd, exchanged glances with a Glorthan behind him, and stepped through the barrier. "Then I will try first." Within an hour, 5 more volunteered. Darian returned to the lab with fresh data and renewed urgency. It took 2 more days of sleepless work. Darian collapsed once from dehydration and was forced to rest under protest. When he returned, he found the Glorthan medic had continued the adjustments. "We replicated your early model," she said. "The French patient is stable. The Tavanari show improved vitals." Darian managed a tired nod. "We'll need to start mass production." "We already have." He turned and saw a line of fabrication units humming in the back room. "I didn't authorize, you were unconscious. We made a judgment call." "Was that incorrect?" "No. Just unexpected." By the end of the 3rd day, the outbreak was under control. Of the original 42, 36 made full recoveries. 6 remained under observation but were stable. No new cases had emerged. Darian stood in the atrium again, watching as the quarantine lights dimmed at last. The habitat's normal hum returned. Shops reopened. Aliens began to move freely again. Dr. Niven approached him, holding a data crystal. "The compiled vaccine files. We've labeled it the Wexley protocol." "Please don't." The doctor tilted his head. "Why?" "I didn't save anyone alone. You did this. All of you." The Glorthan medic stepped forward. "Still, without your knowledge, I just remembered something Earth already learned." "That's not brilliance. It's just history." A low chuckle came from the Tavanari who'd first volunteered. "Then your history is worth preserving." Darian looked around the atrium, now filled with laughter and light. He exhaled. "Let's hope we don't repeat the parts where we stored deadly viruses in mislabeled folders." Dr. Niven looked sheepish. "We've already revised our archival protocols." "Good." The crisis had passed. The aliens had learned something new and perhaps more importantly, so had Darian. Not about viruses or vaccines, but about trust. In the end, that had made all the difference. 3 days after the last patient stabilized, Darian found himself staring at a cup of lukewarm kelva root infusion in the habitat's communal mess, an aromatic drink the French brewed for clarity of thought, but which mostly reminded him of wet bark and regret. He hadn't slept more than a few hours since the outbreak was contained. The chair under him vibrated slightly, tuned to the Glorthan posture standard, which made it feel like sitting on a twitching accordion. Across the table, the Tavanari volunteer rail corps had been silently studying him for several minutes. "You still look unwell," rail corps said, his narrow pupils tracking Darian's every blink. "Are all your species this stubborn about recovery? You ever try being the only person who knows what chickenpox is in a room full of interstellar microbiologists?" "No, I generally avoid microbiologists." Railcore's skin had returned to its usual matte green, though faint traces of the rash still lingered along his jawline. He tapped his claw against the table, then leaned in. "Do you know why I volunteered?" he asked. "I figured you were either brave or bored." "I was terrified." Darian raised an eyebrow. "I volunteered," Railcore continued, "because I thought, if this human is ready to inject an alien virus into himself without hesitation, then it's either incredibly stupid or incredibly effective. I needed to know which." "That's a comforting endorsement." Railcore gave a low, throaty chuckle. "You were both." Before Darian could reply, the intercom buzzed overhead, and a voice with too many syllables announced, "Medical Bay 2 requesting immediate consult from Earth Consortium Science Corps Operative Darian Wexley. Priority status, Amber." Darian groaned. "I swear if someone's growing smallpox in a salad spinner, I'm leaving the galaxy." Railcore stood with him. "I'll walk you. I have nothing better to do. Plus, you attract fascinating disasters." Medical Bay 2 was quieter than it had been during the outbreak, but the tension in the air was still palpable. A Veltraxian nurse waved them in without comment. Inside, a Glorthan adolescent lay on the diagnostic table, a rash creeping along its arm in irregular clusters. Darian's stomach dropped. No, 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 no. The attending clinician, a Tavanari female with a long scar across her neck, held out a data pad. "Initial markers show it's not the same virus. This one's segmented. We thought it was a mutation of the original, but the protein casing is different, denser." Darian scanned the readout. The structure didn't match anything in the varicella family. He looked up. "This wasn't from the Earth archive." "No. We traced it to a shipment of biosupplements from the outer colonies. The patient's family uses them as part of a dietary therapy." Railker frowned. "So this is new?" "Old," Darian said. "It's mumps. And it's not supposed to be here either." The Glorthan teen groaned softly on the table, rubbing her temples. Darian moved closer and knelt beside her. "Hey, I'm Darian. I'm going to help you feel better, all right?" She blinked slowly, her eyes clouded. "My ears hurt." "Yeah, that's a classic sign. But you're going to be okay." He turned to the clinician. "Anyone else showing symptoms?" 3 suspected. 1 confirmed. All Glorthan, all from the same residential block. Darian stood up slowly. "Lock down that block. Retest everyone. And run a full scan on the supplement shipment. I want to know how this virus got past customs." "You think it came in live?" "Not intentionally. But if the freeze-drying process failed at any stage, even a few active viral particles could survive. Especially with a protective protein shell like this." Railcore crossed his arms. "You humans have a habit of exporting your diseases. We also export the cures." He tapped his wrist console and opened a comm link to the synthesis lab. "We're going to need the mumps vaccine genome. Earth standard, live attenuated. I'll be in the lab in 20 minutes to start conversion." The clinician looked skeptical. "You think it'll work again?" "I think I'd rather not wait until someone's brain swells." Back in the lab, the Glorthan medic from before was already rerouting the fabrication queue. She barely looked up. "You again. You sound excited. I've had 3 hours of sleep since the outbreak. And now you're back with another retro-pathogen. You'll miss me when I'm gone." "That's statistically unlikely." They worked in silence for a while. The Glorthan teen's blood sample showed early signs of neurological impact. Darian adjusted the attenuation curve in the vaccine model to slow the replication rate for Glorthan physiology, which metabolized viral agents more slowly than humans. "This formulation's going to need a buffer," he said. "Something to suppress overreaction." "I've got a compound," the medic replied. It's used in glorthin allergy therapy. Should modulate immune flare-ups without interfering with antigen recognition. Perfect. Add it to the delivery protocol. Railcore leaned against the wall, arms folded. You know, we used to think of your species as primitive. We still are. We've just had more practice being sick. The medic handed him the loaded injector. Trial dose. I'll take it again, Darian said. Railcore stepped forward. You shouldn't. I'm human. I can handle it. Which is exactly why you shouldn't. Let someone closer to the patient's physiology test it. Darian hesitated. I've got glorthin ancestry, Railcore added. Distant, but enough for partial compatibility. Let me. The medic raised an eyebrow. You're volunteering again? I like consistency. She scanned him quickly, then nodded. He's viable. Railcore rolled up his sleeve. Darian hesitated, then administered the dose. They waited. For half an hour, they monitored his vitals. No reaction. No spike in inflammatory markers. No neurological flags. Looks good, Darian said. Let's prepare the first patient dose. By the time they returned to Medical Bay 2, the glorthin teen was semi-lucid and complaining that the lights were too loud. Darian administered the vaccine carefully, watching for any signs of distress. The teen's breathing slowed. Her pulse steadied. She'll need a few days, he said. But she's going to pull through. The clinician exhaled, then shook her head. How many more of these relics are out there? Too many, Darian replied. Earth spent centuries building biological landmines. Now we're dragging them across the galaxy like old luggage. Railcore tilted his head. You think we should stop accepting your samples? No. I think we need to stop assuming they're safe just because we know them. The glorthin medic nodded. We're updating our screening procedures. Live virus detection, not just sequence matching. Good, Darian said. Because next time, it might not be so easy. As they left the bay, Railcore walked beside him again. You really think this will keep happening? Absolutely. And you're still here. Still working. Darian shrugged. Someone's got to clean up the mess. Railcore glanced at him. You ever think about quitting? Once. Then I remembered no one else brings snacks to staff meetings. Railcore barked a laugh. You humans are dangerous. We're charming once you get past the pathogens. They passed a window overlooking the habitat's central garden dome, where artificial sunlight peeked through the simulated clouds. Children of different species ran between the trees, oblivious to the chaos that had nearly unraveled their world days earlier. Railcore watched them for a while. You've changed this place. Just trying to keep it running. No, not just that. You made us realize how fragile we are. And how much more we have to learn. Darian nodded. That's how it starts. Every pandemic. Every cure. Every awkward first contact. We stumble into it, then figure it out on the way. Railcore looked at him. That's not science. That's survival. On Earth, it's usually both. They stood there a moment longer, then turned back toward the lab. There was still work to do. More viruses to neutralize. More mistakes to correct. Darian rubbed his eyes and kept walking. No one ever said progress was hygienic. The nutrient paste exploded across the ceiling in a mustard-colored arc, landing with a wet smack on the ventilation grill. Darian flinched as another tube burst in his hand, the biogel splattering across his shirt. Okay, he muttered, staring at the pile of ruptured containers on the bench. This is either a manufacturing defect or the food's trying to kill me. You're attempting to force a glorthin nutrient supplement through a human centrifuge valve, said the glorthin medic without looking up from her terminal. It's like pouring soup through a harp. I just wanted a protein reading, Darian said, wiping his hands on a towel that was already more paste than fabric. The adolescent's antibody response is off the charts. She's producing something that doesn't match the vaccine profile. It's not rejection? No. It's better. She's developing a hybrid antibody. Cross-reactive. It might blunt other viruses with similar casing structures. The medic paused, then turned to him. You're saying she's building immunity to viruses she hasn't encountered? Possibly. I've never seen it in a glorthin before. In humans, it happens occasionally with certain flu strains, but this is cleaner. More targeted. She clicked her mandibles quietly. You're going to try to replicate it. I'm going to ask her permission first. Then maybe. She gave a sharp nod. Good. If you'd skipped that step, I would have thrown nutrient paste at you. I think the paste is doing that on its own. By the time they reached the adolescent's recovery chamber, it was late afternoon. The artificial sky outside the viewport had turned a dusky lavender, casting long shadows across the floor. The teen sat upright, legs tucked beneath her, reading from a data slate. She glanced up as the door opened. "You're the one who gave me the injection," she said. Darian smiled. "And you're the one who's somehow rewriting immunology textbooks in your sleep." She blinked, confused. "You're producing a new antibody type. It's not harmful. In fact, it could help other Glorthan fight off similar infections." She looked down at her fingers, then back at him. "What do you want to do?" Darian sat beside her bed. "If you're comfortable, we'd like to draw a sample. Study it. Maybe synthesize it for others. Only with your permission. What happens if I say no? Then we thank you for your bravery and leave you alone. You've already done more than most." She considered this, then nodded. "You can take the sample, but I want to see what you find." "Deal." Back in the lab, Darian processed the blood under a low-speed centrifuge, separating plasma and running a spectral analysis. The antibodies showed a binding affinity that overlapped with several virions in the archive, none of them related to the original infection. "She's encoding something novel," Darian said. "Possibly a pan-capsid recognition structure." "That's not supposed to be possible," said the medic. "Not without intentional genetic engineering." "She's not engineered. I checked her genome. All natural. Maybe it's a rare mutation. Maybe the virus interacted with something dormant." Railcore, who had arrived during the scan, leaned against the wall. "Or maybe you're just too used to Earth logic." Darian didn't argue. He was too busy isolating the antibody strands and constructing a simulation. Over the next few hours, the lab filled with the low hum of processors and the rhythmic clatter of glass tools. Just after evening cycle began, the simulation completed. The results were clear. "If we can synthesize this," Darian said, "we might be able to preemptively inoculate against a whole category of similar viruses." Railcore crossed his arms. "Are you saying this girl accidentally invented a better immune system?" Darian nodded. "Could be. Or she just got lucky. Either way, we need to be careful. You're worried about ethics. I'm worried about replicating something we don't fully understand. If we mass-produce this and it triggers cross-reactions in other species." The medic tapped her terminal. "We'll start with controlled trials. One species. Adults only. Voluntary." "Agreed," said Darian. "We'll publish the findings through the Scientific Council. No shortcuts." The next day, the adolescent returned to her home unit, walking under her own power. She left with a small bag of nutrient packs, a list of follow-up checks, and full knowledge of what her immune system had done. "Tell me if it helps anyone," she said to Darian before she left. "We will." Within 48 hours, the synthesized antibody was tested on a small group of Glorthan volunteers, all carefully screened. The results were promising: no adverse reactions, and a notable increase in general viral resistance markers. By the end of the week, the outbreak was declared fully resolved. The supplement shipment was traced to a freighter with outdated decontamination protocols. All similar cargo was quarantined. The station's Interspecies Health Oversight Committee, previously known mostly for issuing strongly worded memos, implemented new cross-species biosecurity measures, including mandatory pathogen mapping for all incoming Earth-derived materials. In the lab, Darian sealed the final sample vials and handed them off to the Veltraxian data archivist. "That's the last of it," he said. "No further mutations detected. We're in the clear." The archivist blinked both inner and outer eyelids. "You are returning to Earth?" "Eventually. But I think I'll stay a bit longer. Help with the training protocols." Railcore appeared in the doorway. "He's afraid if he leaves, you'll all start licking unmarked petri dishes again." The archivist turned to Darian. "Is that common among your species?" "No," Darian said, "but it wouldn't shock me." The next morning, Darian stood before a group of alien trainees, Veltraxian, Glorthan, Tavanari, and 2 French, each in front of a simulation console. "All right," he said. "Lesson 1. If you find anything labeled harmless Earth contaminant, assume it isn't." 1 French raised a limb. "Even if it says non-pathogenic?" "Especially then." The room chuckled. Darian powered up the first case study on the screen. "Let's start with a simple scenario. You're cataloging a frozen archive from Earth. You find a sealed vial marked 1984 common cold sample. What's your first move?" "Evacuate," said a Veltraxian. "Close," said Darian. "You isolate it, secure it, and notify a human specialist. Then you evacuate." The session continued for hours, filled with questions, simulations, and the occasional nervous laugh. Darian felt something he hadn't felt in weeks, a sense of calm. No emergencies. No sirens. Just learning. After the trainees left, Railcore joined him by the viewport. "You're good at that," he said. "I've had practice. You really think we can avoid something like this in the future?" "No. But we'll handle it better each time." Railcore nodded slowly. "If someone told me a month ago that a human would save this station from 2 retroviruses and teach a French how to use a centrifuge, I would have filed it under satire." "Most human achievement is satire until it works," said Darian. They looked out over the habitat garden, where the last of the artificial daylight faded into a soft, simulated dusk. Children played. Vendors reopened their stalls. The scent of spiced kelva bread drifted through the vents. Darian stretched, then turned to leave. "I'm heading back to the lab. I've got a report to finish and a request from the French Council for more training modules." Railcore raised a brow ridge. "They trust you now. They trust the results. I just happen to be attached to them." As he walked away, Railcore called after him. "Darian." He turned. "You're still covered in nutrient paste." Darian looked down at the dried smear on his sleeve. "I'm keeping it," he said. "It's a souvenir." Railcore gave a low, amused grunt as Darian disappeared into the corridor, the faint echo of his boots mixing with the quiet hum of the station, still flawed, still fragile, but safer than it had been.